The Rainbow Magic Treasury. Amber, the Orange Fairy. Chapter 2. What a lovely day, Rachel Walker cried. She and her friend Kirsty Tate were running along Rainspell Island, yellow sandy beach. Their parents walked a little way behind them. It's a magical day, Kirsty added with a grin. As they ran, they passed through rock pools that shone like jewels in the sunshine. Rachel spotted a little splash in one of the pools, and there was something in there. Kirsty, she pointed, let's go and have a look. Kirsty's heart thumped. She gazed in the crystal clear water. Suddenly the water rippled. The little brown crab scuttled across the sandy bottom and vanished under a rock. Kirsty felt disappointed. I thought it might be a rainbow fairy, she said. Rachel sighed. Never mind, we'll have to keep looking. Of course we will, Kirsty agreed. Rachel looked at the shimmering blue sea. Shall we ever swim? But Kirsty wasn't listening. Look over there, by the rocks, she said. Rachel saw something sparkling in the sunshine. She hurried along and picked up a piece of shiny purple foil. It's just a wrapper from a chocolate bar, she said sadly. Do you remember what Fairy Queen said? Kirsty asked. Rachel nodded. Let the magic come to you, she said. You're right, Kirsty. We should wait for the magic to happen. After all, that's how we found Ruby, isn't it? She put a beach bag on the sand. Come on, race you to the sea. They rushed into the water and splashed until they got goosebumps, and they walked along the beach looking for shells. They found long, thin blue shells and tiny red, round white shells. Soon their hands were full. They walked right through the curve of the bay. Rachel looked over her shoulder. Look how far we've come, she said. Kirsty stopped. A gust of wind tugged at her t-shirt, and she shivered. It's getting cold now, she said. Should we go back? Yes, it must nearly be tea time, said Rachel, and they began to walk back along the beach. That's funny, said Kirsty. It's not windy here. They looked back and saw little swirls of sand being blown up around where they'd just been. The two friends looked at each other with excitement. That's magic, Kirsty whispered. It has to be. They walked back till the breeze swirled along their legs again. The sand began to drift to one side, as if an invisible hand was pushing it away. A large scallop shell appeared, much bigger than the other shells on the beach. With pearly white and soft orange streaks, and it was tightly closed. The girls knelt down on the sand, spilling the little shells out of their hands. Kirsty was about to pick up the scallop shell when Rachel pulled her hand. Listen, she whispered. Inside the shell, a tiny silvery voice was humming. Very carefully, Rachel picked up the shell. The humming stopped at once. I mustn't be scared, said the tiny voice. I just have to be brave, and help will come very soon. Hello, Kirsty whispered. Is there a fairy in there? Yes, cried the voice. I am Amber, the Orange Fairy. Can you help me out of here? Of course we will, Kirsty promised. My name is Kirsty, and my friend Rachel is here too. She looked at Rachel. We found another rainbow fairy. Quick, Rachel said. Let's go to get the shell open. She took hold of the scallop shell and tried to pull the two halves apart. Nothing happened. Try again, said Kirsty. She and Rachel grasped one half of the shell and tugged, but the shell stayed tightly shut. What's happened? Amber called. Can't open the shell, Kirsty said. But we must think of something. She turned to Rachel. If we find a piece of driftwood, we could use that to open the shell. Rachel glanced around. I can't see any driftwood, she said. We could try by tapping the shell on a rock, but that might hurt Amber, Kirsty said. Suddenly Rachel remembered something about the magic bags that fairies bring with us. Of course, Kirsty put her face close to the shell again. Amber, we're going to look in our magic bags. Okay, but please hurry, Amber called. Rachel opened the beach bag. The two magic bags were hidden under a towel. One of the bags was glowing with golden light. Open it quick, Kirsty whispered. As Rachel undid the bag, a fountain of glittery sparks flew out. She slid her hand into the bag. She could feel something light and soft inside. She pulled it out, scattering sparkles everywhere. It was a shimmering golden feather. Rachel tried to use the feather to push the two halves of the shell apart, but the feather just curled up in her hand. Maybe we should ask Amber how to open the shell with a feather, said Rachel. Amber, we've looked in the magic bags, Kirsty said. We found a feather. Oh, good, Amber said happily. But we don't know what to do with it, Rachel added. Amber laughed. It sounded like a tinkle of a tiny bell. You tickle the shell, of course. Let's give it a try, Kirsty said. Rachel began to tickle the shell with her feather. At first nothing happened, and they heard a soft, gritty chuckle. And then another, and another. Slowly the two halves of the shell began to open. It's working, Kirsty gasped. Keep tickling, Rachel. The shell was laughing hard now. The two halves opened wider, and there, sitting with the smooth peach-coloured shell, was Amber, the orange fairy. I'm free, Amber cried joyfully. She shot out of the shell and up in the air. The orange fairy dust floated down on Kirsty and Rachel. It turned into orange bubbles as it fell. One of the bubbles landed on Rachel's arm and burst into a tiny pop. The bubbles smelt like oranges. Rachel smiled. Amber turned cartwheels through the sky. Thank you, she called. She wore a shiny orange catsuit and long boots. Her flame-coloured hair was tied in a ponytail and a band of peach blossoms. She held an orange wand tipped with gold. I'm so glad you found me, Amber cried. But who are you? And where are my rainbow sisters? Suddenly she stopped. She floated down and landed softly on Rachel's hand. I'm sorry, she said with a smile. I've been shut up in the shell ever since Jack Frost's spell banished me from Fairyland. How did you know where to find me? Kirsty and I promised your sister Ruby that we would look out for all the rainbow fairies, Rachel told her. Ruby? Amber's face lit up. You found Ruby? Yes. She's quite safe, Rachel said. She's in the pot at the end of the rainbow, under a willow tree. Amber did a backflip. Please take me to her, she begged. I'll ask our parents if we can go for a walk, Kirsty said. She ran across the beach, quickly came back. Mum said that's fine, she panted. Let's go, Amber called. She flew up and did a somersault in mid-air. Rachel pulled their shorts, t-shirts and trainers out of the bags for both the girls to put on. Rachel, could I bring you my shell? Amber asked. Rachel looked surprised. Yes, of course, she said. It's really comfy, Amber explained. It will make a lovely bed for me and my sisters. Rachel put the shell in a beach bag, and they set off with Amber sitting cross-legged on Kirsty's shoulder. My wings are a bit stiff after being in a shell, she said. I don't think I can fly very far yet. The girls reached out to the clearing at the pot at the end of the rainbow was hidden. The pot was there where they left it, under a weeping willow tree, but climbing out of it was a big green frog. Oh no, Rachel cried. Where was Ruby? Rachel dashed forward and grabbed the frog round his plump green tummy. The frog glared at her. What do you think you're doing? He croaked. Rachel was shocked. She let go of the frog. He hopped away, looking very annoyed. It's a talking frog, Kirsty gasped. Bertram! Amber flew down from Kirsty's shoulder and threw her arms around the frog. Thank goodness you're safe, Miss Amber, said the frog. Amber beamed as Rachel and Kirsty. Bertram isn't an ordinary frog, they explained. She's one of King Oberon's footmen. Oh yes, said Kirsty. We saw the frog footmen when we went to the palace in Fairyland with Ruby, but they were wearing purple uniforms then. Rachel added, a frog in a purple uniform would not be a good idea in Rainspell Island, Bertram pointed out. It's much better if I look like an ordinary frog. What are you doing here, Bertram? Asked Amber. Where's Ruby? Don't worry, Bertram replied. Miss Ruby is safe in the pot. He looked very stern. King Oberon sent me to Rainspell. The Cloud Fairies spotted Jack Frost's goblins sneaking out of Fairyland. We think he has sent them here to stop the Rainbow Fairies being found. Kirsty felt a shiver run down her spine. Jack Frost's goblins, she said. They're his servants, Amber explained. Her wings trembled as she looked very scared. They want to keep Fairyland cold and grey. I'll look after you, Miss Amber, Bertram croaked. Suddenly a shower of red fairy dust shot out of the pot. Ruby fluttered out. Amber, she shouted joyfully. They found you. Ruby, Amber called. She cartwheeled towards her sister, and the air frizzed with tiny red flowers and orange bubbles. Thank you, Kirsty and Rachel, said Ruby. She and Amber floated down to them, holding hands. It's so good to have Amber back safely. What about you? Rachel asked. Have you been all right in the pot? Ruby nodded. I'm fine now that Bertram is here, she replied. He's been making the pot into a fairy home. I brought my shell with me, Amber said. It was making a lovely bed for us. Show her, Rachel. Rachel took the peach-coloured shell out of her bag. It's beautiful, said Ruby. She smiled at Rachel and Kirsty. Would you like to come and see our new home? But the pot's too small for Kirsty and me to get inside, Rachel pointed. And she began to tingle with excitement. Are you going to make us fairy size again? Ruby nodded. She and Amber flew over the girls' heads, showering them with fairy dust. Rachel and Kirsty started to shrink, just as they'd done before. Soon they were tiny, the same size as Ruby and Amber. Being a fairy is the best thing ever, Kirsty said happily. She twisted round to look at her silvery wings. Yes, it is, Rachel agreed. Bertram hopped over the pot. I'll wait outside, he croaked. Ruby took Rachel's hand, and Amber took Kirsty's, and the fairies led towards them to the pot. Rachel and Kirsty fluttered through the air, dodging a butterfly that was big as they were. Its wings felt like velvet as they brushed gently past it. "I'm getting better at flying," Kirsty laughed as she landed neatly on the edge of the pot. She looked down eagerly. The pot was full of sunlight. There were little chairs made of twigs tied with blades of grass. Each chair had a cushion made from a berry. The rugs were bright green, leaves covered the floor. "Shall we fetch the shell?" said Rachel, and they flew out of the pot. Bertram was already pushing the shell across towards them. "Here you are," he croaked. The shell seemed very heavy now that Rachel and Kirsty were the same size as Ruby and Amber. Bertram helped them heaved into the pot. Ruby lined with the sweet-smelling rose petals. "I wish I could live here too," said Kirsty. Ruby turned to her sister. "Do you like it, Amber?" she said. "It's beautiful," Amber replied. "It reminds me of our house back in Fairyland. I miss it so much." "Well, I can show you Fairyland," Ruby said, "even if we can't go back there yet. Follow me." Bertram was still on the guard next to the pot when they flew out again. "Where are you going?" he croaked. "To the magic pond," Ruby replied. "Come with us." She sprinkled her magic dust over Rachel and Kirsty. Quickly they grew back to their normal size. They went over to the pond. Ruby flew above the water, scattering fairy dust just like before, and a picture began to appear. "Fairyland," Amber cried, gazing into the water. Fairyland looked sad and chilly. The place had toadstool houses, and the flowers and the trees were all drab and grey. Suddenly a cold breeze rippled through the surface of the water, and the picture began to fade. "What's happening?" Kirsty asked. Another picture was taking shape in the pond, a thin, grinning face with icicles hanging from his beard. "It's Jack Frost," Ruby gasped. As she spoke, the air turned icy cold, and the edges of the pool began to freeze. "What's happening?" Rachel asked, shivering. "It is bad news," said Bertram. "It means Jack Frost and the goblins are close by." The whole pond froze over. Jack Frost's grinning face faded away. "Follow me," Bertram added. He hopped into a large bush. "We'll hide in here." "Maybe we should go back to the pot," said Ruby. "Not if the goblins are close by," said Bertram. "We mustn't let them know where the pot is." The two girls crouched down behind the bush next to Bertram, and Ruby and Amber huddled together on Kirsty's shoulder. It was getting colder and colder. Rachel and Kirsty couldn't stop their teeth chattering. "What are the goblins like?" Rachel whispered. "They're bigger than us," said Amber, trembling, "and they have ugly faces and hooked noses and big feet." Ruby added. "Hush, Miss Ruby," Bertram croaked. "I can hear something." Rachel saw a hook-nosed shadow flit across the clearing towards them. She grabbed Kirsty's arm. Suddenly the leaves rustled right next to him. They almost jumped out of their skin. "Oi," said a gruff voice, sounding very close. "What do you think you're doing?" Rachel and Kirsty held their breath. "Nothing," said another gruff voice. "Goblins," Amber whispered in Kirsty's ear. "You stood on my toe," said the first goblin. "No, I didn't," snapped the other goblin. "Yes, you did. Keep your big feet to yourself." "Well, at least my nose isn't as big as yours." The bush shook even more. It sounded as if the goblins were pushing and shoving each other. "Get out of my way," said one of them. "Ow!" Rachel and Kirsty looked at each other in alarm. What if the goblins found them there? "Come on," said one of the goblins. "Jack Frost will be cross if we don't find these fairies. You know he wants us to stop them getting back to Fairyland." "Well, they're not here, are they?" grumbled the other. "Let's try somewhere else." The voices died away. The leaves stopped rustling. Suddenly the air felt warm again. It was a cracking sound as the frozen pond began to melt. "They've gone," Bertram croaked. "Quick, we must get back to the pot." They hurried across the clearing. The pot stood under the weeping willow just as before. "Oh no, look," Kirsty cried. "The pot's frozen over." The top of the pot was covered with a thick sheet of ice. No one, not even Fairy, could get inside. "Oh no," Ruby gasped. "The goblins must have passed really close by." She flew over to the pot and Amber right behind her. They drummed on the ice with their tiny fists, but it was too thick for them to break through. "Shall we try, Rachel?" asked Kirsty. "We could smash the ice with a stick." But Bertram had another idea. "Stand back, please, everyone." Suddenly he leaped forward with a mighty hop and jumped straight at the sheet of ice, kicking it out with his webbed feet. But the ice did not break. "Try again," he panted. He jumped forward again and hit the ice. This time there was a loud cracking sound, and one more jump, and the ice shattered into little pieces. Some of it fell inside the pot. Rachel and Kirsty rushed over to fish them out before they melted. "There you are," Bertram croaked. "Thank you, Bertram," Ruby added. She and Amber flew down and hugged the frog. Bertram looked pleased. "Just doing my job." "Miss Ruby," he said, "you and Miss Amber must stay very close to the pot from now on. It's dangerous for you to go too far away." We've got to say goodbye to our friends first, Amber told them. She flew into the air, smiling at Rachel and Kirsty. Thank you 1,000 times. We'll see you again soon, said Rachel. When we found your next rainbow sister, Kirsty added. Good luck, said Ruby. We'll be waiting here for you. She took her sister's hand and they flew over to the pot. The two fairies turned and waved at the girls and they disappeared inside. Don't worry, Bertram said. I'll look after them. We know you will, Rachel said. She and Kirsty walked out of the wood. I'm glad Ruby isn't on her own anymore, said Rachel. I didn't like those goblins, Kirsty said with a shudder. I hope they don't come back again. They made their way back to the beach. Their parents were packing away their towels. We were just coming to look for you, said Mr. Walker. We're going home now, Rachel asked. Mr. Walker nodded. It turned very chilly, he said. As he spoke, a cold breeze swirled around Rachel and Kirsty. They shivered and looked up in the sky. The sun had disappeared behind a thick black cloud. Jack Frost's goblins are still here, Kirsty gasped. You're right, Rachel agreed. Let's hope Bertram can keep Ruby and Amber safe while we look for the other fairies.